Dear teachers, dear students, dear guests, good afternoon. Today is a very rare and precious day. The light rain of early winter falls on the campus of Hunan Normal University. The respected Khenpo Sodargye Rinpoche will give us a teaching on the Buddhist view of compassion. The view of compassion is the essence of Mahayana Buddhism. To make the world more harmonious and beautiful, everyone needs moral education based on the view of compassion. Compassion is selfless love. Compassion is broad tolerance. Compassion is the most beautiful gift in the world. Compassion is the most perfect happiness for the mind. Now, let us, with warm applause, welcome the respected Khenpo Sodargye Rinpoche to teach us on Buddhist compassion and moral education.
I'm very happy today at Hunan Normal University School of Life Sciences to exchange ideas with many students and intellectuals. Today's topic of exchange is mainly Buddhist compassion and moral education. Buddhist compassion, I'd like to briefly introduce it first. Those present may perhaps understand Buddhism very well, or perhaps not understand it. Actually, Buddhism's view of compassion, view of karma, view of rebirth, view of happiness, and so on. Now, we young people present here need to understand them very much because they are what humanity needs most. If there's no view of compassion, our society will become a particularly pessimistic image. Therefore, I think that Buddhism's view of compassion nowadays is something indispensable. Today's higher education institutions don't lack talent. Many people's wisdom should far exceed the wisdom of several decades ago. Moreover, science and technology are also continuously developing. Compassionate thinking, that is to say, the concept of moral education. This, for human life, for society, has functions and power that cannot be described in words. Therefore, we present here may have heard a lot of knowledge in class, but perhaps we've never thought about it. How exactly should I be a person? How should I benefit society? How should I help all living beings? Our School of Life Sciences may do dissections or experiments every day, but have we considered the value of life or each life? All desire to seek happiness and are unwilling to suffer pain. Have we observed such feelings? Everyone can ask themselves honestly. Buddhism's so-called compassion. You may have heard of Nagarjuna Bodhisattva. After Buddha passed into nirvana 2,500 years ago, there was a particularly great Buddhist thinker called Nagarjuna Bodhisattva. In Nagarjuna's The Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, how are loving kindness and compassion explained. Great loving kindness is giving happiness to all sentient beings. Great compassion is removing suffering from all sentient beings. That is to say, so-called loving kindness is giving all living beings a kind of happiness. So-called compassion is making all living beings separate from such suffering. We people present can also think about it. In our daily lives, have we really thought about all the people around us or other animals? If we haven't thought about it, and what we often think is, as for other animals besides humans, we eat what we can, wear what we can wear. If it's always like this particularly cruel emotion may not necessarily bring happiness to our lives. There's a saying, we must watch our thoughts, otherwise they will become our words. We must watch our words, or they become our actions. We must focus on our actions, or they become our habits. We must control our habits, or they become our life. There's such a particularly famous saying. This saying means our usual conduct and thoughts are closely connected with our lives. So our society today indeed needs the view of compassion. I want to have compassion for all beings, whether human or other life forms. Such a feeling, such a mind and intention, if we have this, all aspects of life in the entire world will be improved. Therefore, we often find that people now are relatively utilitarian. That is to say, selfishness is particularly strong. For their own sake, they can harm the physical and mental health of many, many people. Many people know that now many of our pharmaceutical factories go through various improper channels, and in the end, the medicine produced is all fake. Many of our commercial industries are run by people who don't understand karma, now creating life-threatening dangers for many, many people. Also, our hospitals, the so-called angels in white who can save lives, have now become black and white impermanents, harbingers of death. Also, many of our teachers should be engineers of the human soul, but now everyone should be clear. They can be called the chief culprits of misleading students. This society has many not so good images, including some cultivated by higher education institutions. If there's no morality, everyone knows, no matter how high level the school you study at, later there are also some not so good phenomena. For example, graduates from Peking University, of course there are also some good ones, but there's also quite a portion who haven't received true character education. A while ago, I went to a place and heard about a Peking University graduate who was selling pork in the market. Later, I heard that the local county party secretary felt it was having a Peking University talent sell pork was a bit shameful, so he specially arranged to transfer him to a relatively good job. But later, this person simply didn't know how to be a person. His conduct and ability to interact with people around him were particularly poor. There was really no way. He couldn't get along with anyone, and he himself was extremely distressed. He could only sell pork himself. Basically, he could get by with life that way. Later, he could only return and reportedly continue selling pork there. There's also Peking University's pig farming king. Many, many such cases and examples. We present here may have heard of them too. Of course, I've previously visited some schools, religious research institutes, and philosophy departments. Many people's aspiration for religion and truth is also very good, but we people present need to know. People at school need to cultivate a truly kind heart. Actually, if we who study at normal schools don't have a good motivation, I'm afraid later you may not necessarily benefit students. A while ago in Hangzhou, some people said, "I'd rather be a prostitute than a teacher." This has already caused a sensation and attention both domestically and internationally. Why is this? Because now our morality is increasingly diminishing. In many higher education institutions, there are only some goals of making money, some ideas of getting rich. Besides this, the concept in education of how to be responsible to society and to the next generation, and the transmission of knowledge and education, these are extremely lacking. So I think we people present should first think about this. What does our current society indeed lack most? A kind heart. If people have a kind heart, their body and speech, all their actions, will follow the mind. In this way, people in every corner can each create a meaningful enterprise. Eventually, rivers can form a great sea. For the entire society, for the entire world, there will also be a certain happiness attained. Then we people present today should also be able to understand the so-called Buddhist view of compassion. Actually, it won't cause any harm to any sentient being. We can say it's Buddhism's special view of compassion. I remember in the Sutra of Great Adornment, it says, Buddhism's great compassion never harms living things. This is completely different from other religions like Christianity and Confucianism. Buddhism's true view of compassion has never advocated, has never spoken of harming the lives of sentient beings. This is the lives of sentient beings, not the lives of plants. Regarding life, I think you students who research life definitely understand that animal life and plant life are not the same. Plant life, although it has some reactions, doesn't have real suffering. But if we humans have real greed and desire, in the end, they will harm many, many human beings. Human beings are also those they're willing to harm, and they'll also harm other animals. I remember Buddhist sutras also say this. The poison of greed can harm all people. When people have such greed, when people have attachment and ignorant delusion, they will harm many, many sentient beings, including in our current world. Perhaps beyond what you can imagine, many sentient beings will also be harmed. Therefore, I'm thinking that we now lack this moral education, and this will harm many people. For the country, for society, lacking virtue is a danger. President Roosevelt of America also once said, "Cultivating people's minds while lacking moral education constitutes a hazard or danger to the country." I think what he said makes a lot of sense. Therefore, we should look at ourselves. Do we have compassion for everyone? What Buddhism advocates is not harming any life. This is one part of Buddhism's most profound essence. The Buddha's true spirit is not harming sentient beings and possessing incomparable wisdom. Buddhism's particularly great master, Aryadeva, also said this in his 400 verses. The Dharma spoken by the Tathagata, briefly speaking, has only two kinds. Not harming leads to rebirth in human and celestial realms. Observing emptiness realizes nirvana. This statement is very important. What the Tathagata has spoken, all the Dharma proclaimed by Shakyamuni Buddha, can all be included in two matters. One is not harming any sentient being. The other is using wisdom to comprehend all phenomena. And finally, attaining accomplishment. On this point, Buddhism is particularly clear. Perhaps at first, many of us don't quite understand or find it somewhat difficult to comprehend. Confucian thought doesn't speak this way. They only have some principles of benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trustworthiness. Everyone knows that based on trustworthiness, benevolence is the highest realm. But for the sake of their parents' bodies, for the sake of certain people, they can kill living beings, kill fish, kill other animals. It's like this, but this is unreasonable. Even in our Tibetan Buddhism, including in Tibetan medicine, when preparing medicine, dissection and killing life simply don't exist. Moreover, without such killing, they still achieved very good results. I remember on this point, during the Tang Dynasty, Sun Simiao, who people called the king of medicine, also said in his prescriptions worth 1,000 gold, "Killing life to seek life makes life even more distant." You may perhaps know this. What does it mean? From the perspective of Chinese medicine, it's also like this. Wanting to attain longevity through killing life is fundamentally impossible to achieve. It makes your quest for life, your physical health, more and more distant. Now, some people, for the sake of their health and nutrition, start stewing chicken, stewing duck, eating fish, eating live crabs, shrimp, and so on. Of course, our education and environment have formed a concept that people nowadays don't care about. This is a common concept. Actually, if you truly eat other living beings, then for your body, indeed, not only does it not have the effect of longevity or curing illness, but instead, it constitutes a physical harm to you. This is a natural law. This point is not just spoken by us, a very small number of Buddhists. Moreover, many intellectuals in particularly developed science now completely recognize this as a social concept. A few days ago, you may have also seen it. In November, there was a TV host in London, England, also a particularly famous actress named Miss Sarah Honeywell. On the streets of London, in a particularly large serving dish, she herself lay there half naked, with some vegetarian dishes placed beside her. What was the purpose of her behavior? It was to stimulate people's compassion for the killing of animals and further elevate our moral thinking. At that time, there was the world's largest animal protection organization. This organization now has more than 2 million members. Their slogan was written above. What does this mean? Whether it's the West or the East, many people now don't base it on faith. It should be based on their own health and also making some comparisons with the lives of other animals. For the sake of our health, for the existence of our lives, if we lose the particularly precious lives of other animals, this is a very cruel behavior. Moreover, indirectly, it has already shown what? It's the issue of behavioral standards for a social group. Previously, India's particularly great pacifist, Mahatma Gandhi. Have you heard of him, everyone? So what did Mahatma Gandhi say? He said, the degree of a nation's greatness and its moral standard can be measured by how it treats animals. This statement indeed has particularly profound meaning. Whether people's quality of a nation can improve, it depends on looking at the loving kindness and compassion toward animals around them. The so-called compassion I'm talking about today is not only compassion toward people, it should include the animals around us. We should also have a concept of compassion. If we don't have this, perhaps when you reach old age, some individuals will wake up. The day before yesterday at a place, there was a university teacher. When this university teacher was doing life release together, the place where we released lives was in a currently public park, a park that's publicly open for tourism. She then recalled that nearly 20 years ago, she herself at that time didn't believe in Buddhism and held her wedding ceremony there. At that time, she killed many lives. Now, releasing life is to compensate for those lives at that time. So some people, when they're young at first, seem like you don't believe in this set of things. But later, indeed, they also understand this principle. When they understand, some people will repent. Some people may not necessarily even have the interest to repent. Anyway, many people present here, recall the true view of compassion. If we have the view of compassion, we have no malice in our mind stream, and we go all out to constantly do things that care for all other lives. This is particularly important. On this point, what's mentioned in Confucianism is a bit different from what's mentioned in our Buddhism. We can say it's a deeper level of understanding. Some people think that perhaps Buddhism is more strict. For example, what Confucianism mainly talks about is filial piety. In Buddhism, isn't it that when you become a monastic, some people seem to be unfilial to their parents? There are also such ideas. Actually, this is a misunderstanding. Now, many people have negative understandings of Buddhism. Positive understandings are few. Negative thoughts and wrong views brought by some media and other channels are relatively numerous. We should say that filial piety in Buddhism, actually human life is not just like a piece of wood or a tree, limited only to this life. It should be said to be very long. Filial piety to parents is not just money, status, wealth only. This is sufficient. We should think long term. Just as the sutra spoken by the inconceivable light bodhisattva says, repaying kindness to parents, just money, just food and drink, cannot repay their kindness. If they can truly seek the truth and their minds turn toward the Dharma, then we can truly repay the kindness. When parents are free from defilement, the child's way is accomplished. Master Lianqi's words have very profound meaning. The meaning is that if we as children try our best to have our parents refrain from killing and love sentient beings, or practice virtue and stop evil, and do such very good behaviors, making parents ultimately practice virtuous dharma. If they practice virtuous dharma, this is great filial piety. Generally, filial piety is divided into filial piety, great filial piety, and extremely great filial piety. Extremely great filial piety means making them separate from suffering and attain happiness life after life. This is true happiness. So I'm thinking that we people present here should also understand Buddhism from various aspects. This point is very important. Now, many people, perhaps due to various factors, basically have no Buddhist concepts at school. This point is particularly regrettable. Like Thailand, they integrate Buddhist education with general social education completely into one. Many school advisors or main school administrators in Thailand are Buddhist monastics. The teaching content in schools, the concepts of general education and Buddhist content are combined together. Within this, regularly during the week, they advocate Chan meditation, advocate sutra recitation, and such thoughts. Gradually, these thoughts are spread. Ultimately, what can everyone truly inspire? It's the view of compassion and also the concept of loving sentient beings. Generally, the nature of Thai education is like this. Even in higher education institutions, there are even deeper teaching concepts. This is very, very important. Including Britain, you may perhaps know that now Britain has legislated Buddhism. All schools can directly study the true content of Buddhism. Previously, a religious official in Britain said this. Buddhism is now particularly popular, especially in higher education institutions. Why? because the view of dependent origination in Buddhism and Buddhism's so-called Four Noble Truths and so on, these can completely match with science. What Buddhism talks about, the 3 refuges and 5 precepts, the 6 paramitas, the 4 means of attraction, these and what higher education now advocates, regulating people's behavior, can completely be integrated into one. Also, non-violence, peace, loving kindness, and so on, advocated by Buddhism, these concepts are indispensable for today's society. They can elevate people's moral concepts and at the same time stabilize society and so on. They play many roles. So now many well-known people in society feel that in a school, in a social group, without education in loving kindness, without a true understanding of love, every day with a selfish mind, every day with a mind attached to oneself, for your career, for many of your behaviors, this may not necessarily be very beneficial. Of course, I think perhaps people present here particularly like to listen to how to adjust your body to attain health. What kind of mental cultivation will immediately relax you, reduce your pressure, and so on. Many people probably like to hear these. But at a deeper level, when we talk about the so-called view of compassion on the basis of moral concepts, it can gradually manifest. Many people may not necessarily be very interested in this concept. This has a very close relationship with our society's moral education. So I'm thinking many of us present here in the future, when you're in society, doing any kind of work, I think what's most needed is we need to have a kind of care. Our care cannot be equated with economics. If every day we have nothing to think about besides status, fame, and profit, or property, or self-development and expansion, then indeed humanity doesn't have a lofty goal. I previously read in A Theory of Moral Development that in any place, any ethnic group or country, if moral concepts are completely abandoned, then in this case, individual morality and social morality often conflict, ultimately becoming chaos, leading finally to the entire world being unsafe. This adverse effect will be produced. Therefore, in Mahayana Buddhism, what we call Mahayana Buddhism in Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism particularly emphasizes loving all sentient beings. Of course, the so-called compassion at such a high level as Buddhism's. For many university students, it may be a bit difficult to keep up with. But as human beings, humans possess compassion and kindness. At the beginning of human nature is goodness. So this goodness of ours in society, in the world, how to inspire it, how to manifest it. In this regard, I hope everyone should think about it, especially everyone at university must have some understanding of Buddhism. Because now any discipline in our society, if you want to dig a bit deeper, you can definitely understand it from. Buddhism has particularly detailed judgments about all phenomena, including their production, origin, and ultimate destruction. Furthermore, our survival in this world indeed cannot be separated from the spirit of Buddhism. The most important spirit in Buddhism is our view of compassion. This view of compassion, of course, if we speak broadly, there's objectless compassion, compassion directed towards sentient beings, compassion directed toward phenomena, and so on. In the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra and other related Mahayana treatises, many such concepts are explained. This definitely has great benefit for everyone. If you truly have no way to understand these, actually, you should know that Buddhism now has more than 2,500 years of history, and it can involve astronomy, geography, including cosmology, and also quantum mechanics, medicine, and so on in the world. All these disciplines can all be found in Buddhism, and very accurate answers can be found in our worldly society, including those now researching life sciences or researching any other sciences. Scientists ultimately cannot find the most accurate and ultimate answer in many fields. But for us as Buddhist researchers regarding any principle of all phenomena, we can say there are many relatively satisfactory answers. Why is this? We are all engaged in research, not obtaining answers in one field while obtaining correct answers in another field. Actually, Buddhism's profundity and mystery indeed I believe, should be understood by many intellectuals today. If you go to understand it, you have many benefits and there won't be any side effects. There won't be any harm. Some people think perhaps if one understands Buddhism too much, it might produce some adverse situations in various aspects. Indeed not. As lay people, there's education that lay people can learn and accept. And as monastics, who can see through this life even more, they have their own knowledge. But the Buddha didn't require that everyone who studies Buddhism must all renounce and go to the mountains. He didn't say this. Therefore, in these aspects, in the future, I hope that current intellectuals, there are quite many misunderstandings about Buddhism in this aspect. We should positively study the teachings of many sutras and treatises. Actually, whether it's Confucian thought or Taoist thought now, originally China's three traditional teachings of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism are its traditional thought. Among traditional thoughts, basically there are many similarities, but there are also some differences. In the areas of difference, Buddhism elaborates even more meticulously. So now, some people in the education field should integrate the concept of Buddhist compassion. If it's not integrated, people all only think about their own interests. Every time an incident occurs, for example, a while ago, students from a school, about 60+ students, were all riding in one vehicle. And in the end, they were crushed by another vehicle. After being crushed, it seems over 20 children died on the spot. Over 40 students the day before yesterday, I saw they seemed to be being rescued. At this time, everywhere they should handle it, they handle it. Then there's extensive publicity everywhere. This is also a necessary action. But I think if everyone had a conscience, if every school didn't prioritize money as most important, they should prioritize the preciousness of human life. They should prioritize that everyone, whether rich or not, needs a particularly good cycle. In this way, in society, it's impossible to cut off all evil actions. This is impossible, but it will reduce many relatively ugly cases. So many of us, students, present here. In the future, you will definitely be teachers and do many meaningful things. At this time, your motivation, your thoughts, your actions, if all of these are only for your own family's service within your own small scope, such a concept probably won't do anything for society. Some people think if it doesn't do anything for society, it doesn't matter. As long as I myself find a satisfactory partner, have a comfortable family, and earn a lot of money, then my life goal is like this. My growth is basically resolved by this. Of course, Confucian thought also says, the superior person loves wealth, but obtains it in accordance with the way. We people who truly have wisdom, our so-called goals, our so-called life, will not all be set on a simple life. It wasn't like this before. Previously, many people prioritized learning knowledge. So why now, basically in the past 50 or 60 years, perhaps there haven't emerged many remarkable writers, many very famous ones like before. Are there any? Everyone can see. Now, most people in our society rush about for money. Day and night, we can say they spare no effort in seeking it. What do they ultimately obtain? On the surface, perhaps there's some material prosperity different from before, but the pressure on our minds is truly pressure as great as mountains. As you often say, pressure as great as mountains. Pressure greater than mountains. Even the earth cannot bear it. On one hand, we can say it bears 7 billion, this way of saying it. But on the other hand, each of us has become pressure as great as mountains. Each person has a kind of pressure on your future path of survival. Where does this pressure come from? It comes from our external circumstances and education, our conscience, and so on. Our current unhealthy food leads to what? Physical ill health. Physical ill health. You can go to a hospital for treatment, but if our education lacks virtue, what does it cause us? Mental ill health. So mental ill health. Now, if you go to any hospital, there's no way. Incurable, we can say this. So many of us normal school students present here. In the future, you will cultivate many people. But what kind are you cultivating? People like yourself or people like your teachers? You now have no thoughts whatsoever. You just desperately make money. Besides desperately making money, there's nothing else. Many people in society now are like this. I've met many people. Many people seem to have no interest in seeking knowledge, particularly cold, particularly bland, a feeling of indifference. What kind of future trouble will such a mentality cause? So I think everyone present here in the future, one thing is that you must value moral education. To value it from childhood, from elementary school, middle school, university, one by one, we should instill education on how to be a person, instill kind education. Actually, in traditional culture, the highest good is like water, originally spoken of in Laozi's Tao Te Ching. Also, in the education of Confucius and Mencius, there are such concepts. But this hasn't particularly received attention now in our education field. Therefore, it's essential how to be a person. When being a person, we should use Buddhism's concept of great loving kindness and great compassion. These two can completely be integrated and interconnected. If in every school each person can be cultivated into a particularly kind person, even in a small matter, they will help others, will be filial to their own parents, not forcibly, not passively, but completely proactively and consciously. If they can be good people, then education will indeed succeed. If each of us is selfish, it's like when driving. When driving, if everyone is selfish, ultimately there's traffic congestion. With traffic congestion, no one can pass, and they're delayed there for a long time. Who is the victim of such behavior? It's ourselves. So as university talents, what's most needed now is a compassionate heart. What's most needed is great loving kindness and great compassion. At the same time, we need to have a kind of good filial moral education. This moral education, now from various schools, we study Dizigui, standards for students, Sanzijing, 3-character classic, and also Qianzi Wen, 1,000-character classic, Xiaojing, classic of filial piety, analects. We can also study traditional culture. Also in our Buddhism, like the Sigalovada Sutra, Ulambana Sutra, and also Sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness. These can also be considered filial piety classics in Buddhism. We can also study these. Through such study, only then can our society definitely have very good changes. Of course, as the host also said earlier, great loving kindness and great compassion. Actually, it is a kind of selflessness. It's a kind of tolerance. And it's the best and most beautiful gift in our world, a path that brings our minds into the happiest and most blissful state. So I also hope that each person present here and each person we will cultivate in the future, the sunlight of compassion shines on the entire world. And each of our lotuses of wisdom continuously reveal their smiles, bringing happiness and joy to the entire world. I think I'll briefly end here.